This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal, and I'm Jess Hannam.
And I'm Jamal Dejani.
Jamal, we are broadcasting again from remote locations in Northern California, and I'm sorry to tell all of our viewers and listeners, but that here in Northern California, we continue to be under a pretty extreme fire watch right now. Tragically and unfortunately, much of the beautiful Napa and Sonoma areas are under fire right now, and many wineries and many homes have been destroyed in these fires, and they're not even 0% contained right now. Outside of your window and my window, we continue to see pretty bad air quality, and we're under an extreme weather watch today. So just that as a backdrop for our viewers and listeners, knowing that we will continue to provide Arab Talk to you under these conditions. Having said all that,
we have a red alert. We have a red alert as of actually on Thursday and Friday.
Exactly. So things are pretty bad right now, which is a good segue to talk about extreme conditions. We are going to speak about the extreme conditions later on in the show about what happened in the debates. That can be considered a red alert, I think, from a medical and psychiatric standpoint. When you watch the presidential debates between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, we'll be talking about that on the other side. But before we get to that, we have a really interesting interview about some mounting military tensions that are going on in the world, which not many people are talking about right now, Jamal.
No, and that's total silence in U.S. news, except for a report here and there in the New York Times and other publications, but really on TV, as you eloquently said, I mean, people are pretty much inundated with still recovering from the aftermath of that horrible presidential debate. So you don't have any coverage for, I think it's a very important story, and this story also affects not only, it's not a regional, actually, it can blow up into the entire region, including the Middle East, and this is the Armenia-Azerbaijan fighting, which could spiral into a larger regional conflict, Jess. And this is, you have intense fighting that has erupted in Nagorno-Karabakh. Right. That's a small enclave in the southern Caucasus Mountains, setting the entire region on edge. This is a fight primarily between Armenia and Azerbaijan, two former Soviet republics with long-held grievances over land. But this involves Russia, Turkey, Israel, Iran, many other countries. And since these fightings broke about a week ago, more than 100 people have died, including civilians. And so we were fortunate enough to have a very good interview with Arab Talk, basically with a Raffi Elliott. And Raffi Elliott is a Canadian-Armenian political risk analyst and journalist based in the capital of Armenia, Yerevan. Let's watch this interview and listen to him. Nearly 100 people, including civilians, have died as battles rage on between Armenian and Azerbaijani forces over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. The mountainous enclave is recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but has been run by Armenians since a war ended in 1994. The fighting that started 3 days ago now appears to be spilling out of the region. Joining Arab Talk to shed more light on the conflict, Raffi Elliott. Raffi is a Canadian-Armenian political risk analyst and journalist based in Yerevan, Armenia. Welcome to Arab Talk, Raffi.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Raffi, I mean, let me begin by saying that I hope that this conflict does not get any worse and that you stay safe. What started it all?
So if you need some brief historical background, Obviously, I am Armenian myself, so keep that in mind that I may be biased, but I will try to give you as objective an answer as possible. So, from the Armenian point of view, the region of Nagorno-Karabakh, the word Nagorno in Russian means mountainous, and Karabakh is a Turkish and Persian loan word which means the black garden. Kara meaning black in Turkish, and Bach is garden in Persian. And for Armenians, that region was called Artsakh. It was at one point an independent Armenian kingdom, and then later it became a province of the Armenian kingdom. It's a very big historical importance for Armenians because it's where the Armenian alphabet was first created. Armenia has a unique alphabet for those who aren't aware. Eventually, the region was overtaken by the Seljuk Turks, and then followed by the Turkomen, who were the tribes who followed after the Seljuks. And the descendants of the Turkomen in that region became the Azerbaijanis, and many of them settled in the region and then competed over it with Armenians until the Russians in the early 19th century retook the entire Caucasus region, so what's today Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, from the Empire of Iran. And when the Russian Empire became Soviet Union in the 1920s, this region was purposely separated from Armenia despite having an overwhelmingly Armenian majority, and was transferred to the Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic, but as a autonomous province, oblast in Russian. So it was an Armenian ethnic province next to Armenia, but in the Azerbaijani Republic. At the time, this was part of Joseph Stalin's idea for a divide and conquer mentality, to separate the ethnicities, mix the borders around so that it became impossible to develop national ethnic identities. So when the Soviet Union began to collapse in the 1980s, the Armenian majority of Nagorno-Karabakh held a referendum according to what they saw as being their constitutional imperatives to rejoin the Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic in 1988. The result was that the Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic began an operation to ethnically cleanse the Armenian population of Baku and Sumgait, which is the capital of Azerbaijan, which historically had a large Armenian minority. And a low-level conflict quickly grew out of scale and became a large international conflict that lasted until 1994, at which point the Armenians took over the entirety of the region and declared it an independent state, the Republic of Artsakh, as it's called in Armenian. Since then, between 1994 and today, successive governments in Azerbaijan have repeatedly declared that they will retake the entirety of that region either through diplomacy or through force, but they've always had a very maximalist position. Whereas on the other Armenian side, there is always ostensibly there was talk of returning some of the territories which had been taken from outside the traditional Nagorno-Karabakh area as bargaining chips. But for Azerbaijan, the negotiation has always been about Armenia simply leaving the entire region or face war. And so for Azerbaijan, there's also been a lot of internal pressure because the regime that currently governs Azerbaijan is presided over by Ilham Aliyev, who is the son of the previous president, who himself had been the general secretary of the Soviet Republic back then, and also the head of the Soviet KGB before that. So it's a political dynasty that maintains control over Azerbaijan mostly through its control of its vast natural resources, particularly oil and gas. Until very recently, the Azerbaijani government kept up its rhetoric about returning Karabakh to the Azeris and so on and so forth, but the amount of money that they made from exporting oil and gas allowed them to obviously take some on the side, but also invest in infrastructure and things like that, which maintained a sense of balance in Azerbaijani society. However, in recent years, the price of oil has been going down. It is now at a historically low point.
Mm-hmm.
There have been several border conflicts since 1994, which have all ended either inconclusively or in humiliation for Azerbaijan, despite the fact that Azerbaijan is 3 times the size of Armenia, has a budget, and they like to brag about the fact that their military budget is larger than Armenia's entire state budget. So there's a lot of internal frustration amongst the Azerbaijani public who are waiting for the president to fulfill his promise. And then, of course, so why now? Why in September 2020? It's an election month. Today, after all, is going to be the first presidential debate in the United States. Mm-hmm. The United States has recently disengaged itself from the process in the South Caucasus and has sort of taken a back seat to Russia and Turkey. At the same time, Turkey, which has just recently been involved in its own adventurism against Cyprus, Greece, and Egypt and Israel in the last couple of months, has now turned its attention to this region and is supporting Azerbaijan in a way that is much more overt than ever before. Mm-hmm. Turkey has always supported Azerbaijan as them both being, Turkic brothers, etc., but never this explicitly, because they have literally promised, and apparently they are providing military and technical and material assistance to the Azeris.
Well, this is the point where I wanted to get to. First, thank you for the good historical background. A couple of points I want to get to. One is because some in the media have been trying to label the conflict as religious, Muslims versus Christians, but it's not. It's more about a territorial dispute. Am I wrong to assume this?
So it's religious in the same way that the troubles of Northern Ireland is religious, right? In the sense that the fighting in Belfast or whatever was never about whether the Queen of England or John Paul II was the true head of the church, right? It was never the religion in that context is part of identity and not an issue of contention. So yeah, I think that there is a bit of an overemphasis on the fact that Armenia is a Christian country, the first Christian country in the world, whereas Azerbaijan and Turkey are Muslim. Having said that, Azerbaijan is a Shia country, whereas Turkey is a Sunni country. So even there's a bit of a disbalance when we talk about religion. But yes, it definitely gets overemphasized. However, that being said, in many ways, Armenians and Azeris resemble each other. There are people who've lived side by side for decades, maybe centuries. One Azeri dissident famously had said that Armenians are Christian Azeris and Azeris are Muslim Armenians. So the religion itself serves rather to distinguish the ethnicities more so than a source of theological contention.
Now you mentioned Turkey, because I see here, in a way, you're right. The United States is just sitting, in the background, making very, Trump has made, I think, a statement about it, of not taking a lot of interest. But this could really explode to a regional conflict because you have Turkey involved. I recently read that the Turks have been using Syrian fighters to help the Azerbaijanis. And then you have the Azerbaijanis receive weapons from Israel, as far as I've kind of been monitoring this conflict. Then you have Iran in the picture. So it's really beyond that small area that this if left unchecked, it could kind of explode beyond the borders.
Yeah, that's absolutely what the major concern in this conflict is that this is a part of the world that most people can't find on a map, and yet the intricate system of alliances that both of these countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan, are involved in, make it that they can easily turn a tiny regional conflict into a major regional one. In fact, as of our recording this conversation right now, the Armenian Ministry of Defense announced that one of their fighters was shot down by a Turkish fighter. The Turks have just denied this. This has happened about an hour ago. The Turks have denied this, but if true, this would be the first time that Armenian and Turkish militaries engaged since 1920, exactly 100 years ago. So that's a major development on its own, and it
And Turkey is
may
a member
pull
of
in
NATO.
Russia. Right. Turkey is a member of NATO, and Armenia has two explicit military alliances with Russia, which it can invoke if it feels concerned that its territorial sovereignty has been violated by Turkey. So far, Armenia has not. Turkey, of course, has denied having shot down the aircraft. We're still waiting to see what's going on. But indeed, you mentioned Israel. That's an interesting point because it's something that's widely focused on by outside observers, the fact that Israel has been militarily supplying Azerbaijan. And that's true in the sense that they've been receiving next generation UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, from Israel, including what they call suicide drones, or kamikaze drones, is also the term that's being used, which the Azerbaijanis have used in Armenia, and this is the first battle incidents in history where this has happened. But it's also worth pointing out that Russia is actually the largest arms supplier to Azerbaijan and to Armenia. So Russia has a vested interest in maintaining the conflict in Karabakh as an ongoing low-level conflict that they can come in and escalate or de-escalate when they feel it's necessary in order to keep the governments in both countries within its orbit. And that creates a sense of tension with Armenia because Armenia feels, first of all, there are historical ties with Russia as being an Orthodox power. Russia historically had always described itself as being the defender of Christians in the Ottoman Empire, and this perception has kind of continued on into the modern era. But also there are military and political alliances between Armenia and Russia, which Armenia expects Russia to fulfill. And so it's a bit vexing for them to find out that a lot of the weaponry that are killing Armenian soldiers right now have been manufactured in Russia and sold to Azerbaijan. But the way Russia sees it is they can't lose Azerbaijan's influence because Azerbaijan is an oil producer. Russia wants to be able to control the flow of Azerbaijani oil into Europe, and they don't want Turkish meddling into what they consider to be their backyard.
So how much oil? What's the role of oil? I mean, you earlier mentioned that oil prices are down, but then Azerbaijan has plenty of oil, right? And is there any pipelines also that connect Russia to the rest of the world through Azerbaijan, or
no? So the whole point is that Azerbaijan is an alternative to Russian oil and gas for Europe, right? And the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the situation in Belarus means that the European Union has been looking for ways to bypass Russia in terms of importing oil. And Azerbaijan offers that alternative. Azerbaijan, in about 10 years ago, built a oil and gas pipeline that completely circumvents Armenia. So it leaves Baku, it goes north into Georgia, and then passes Armenia, and then goes back down into Turkey, and then continues on to Greece. And so they're right now continuing to build that pipe or extensions to that pipeline. So Russia is trying to limit that pipeline as much as possible, and to do so, they want to keep Azerbaijan in their favor.
Now we have a sizable Armenian community in the Middle East, and so you see a lot of people in the Middle East. They support their brothers and sisters in Armenia and Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, and other places. But then you see on the news that Syrian fighters, that's how they put it, are fighting alongside with the Azerbaijanis. I mean, do people in Yerevan make that distinction?
Between Armenians from the Middle East and Arab fighters in
No,
Azerbaijan?
it just they're trying to kind of say, well, here's the Syrians are fighting alongside with the Turks. You know, that's is how it's been reported. While we know that the vast majority of the population support Armenia.
Yeah, I think that Armenians in Armenia understand this distinction quite well, particularly because the Armenian community in Syria has historically been closely aligned to the Bashar al-Assad's regime, the Ba'athist regime. And so for them, and of course, adding to that, the fact that Bashar al-Assad himself has had relatively close relations with Armenia historically. But that being said, for a lot of so Armenia is now home to some 10,000 Syrian-born Armenians who have fled Syria since the civil war began in 2011. And most of them, they fled the jihadists, not the Baathists. Mm-hmm. So from their point of view, I don't think it's fair to say this, but I've seen this comment being made that the jihadists being employed by the Azerbaijanis are sort of a continuation of that suffering that they themselves felt in Syria, because there are several Syrian and Lebanese-born Armenians who are currently in the Armenian army and who are engaged in battles as we speak. But that having been said, there is some evidence that the Arab militants who are currently fighting in Azerbaijan may not necessarily be jihadists. They're actually mercenaries who have been recruited and trained by Turkey, most of whom have been around since 2016 and were not part of the original jihadist movement in northern Syria. They're just being
a lot of them are not even Arabs themselves. Some of them are from Chechnya and other places. As you said, they are mercenaries.
That's possible as well. I don't know what their ethnicities are. They just grabbed anybody who was in Idlib at the time, and reportedly they're being promised, upwards of $1,000 or $1,500 a month to be involved to give their lives for this cause, apparently.
Now, there is no love lost between Turkey and Armenia, going back to the Ottoman Empire. So do you feel that this might actually spill over into kind of get direct? I mean, you've said today that there was breaking news that a pilot was shot down by a Turkish...
and killed, yeah.
And killed. So, I mean, that will be like really very dangerous if Turkey and Armenia go back into direct conflict.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can't stress how critical the situation is right now. It's dark outside, but if I showed out the window, I could see Turkey from here. So we're under no illusions as to what that means for us. On the one hand, I like to think that the idea of Turkey invading Armenia would look very bad on the international scale, considering that most of the world recognizes the Armenian genocide, except for Turkey, of course.
And the United States.
Well, the United States recognized it 2 years ago, or a year ago now.
Well, I mean...
So it was a long time coming, but at least it happened. Yeah. And also 49 out of 50 US states also have individually recognized it. But anyway, the point here being that today, the Turkish foreign minister visited the Azerbaijani embassy in Ankara and declared that Turkey stood with Azerbaijan in their resolve to finally resolve the Armenian question, which is a very troubling use of terminology, considering that solving the Armenian question is the euphemism for the Armenian genocide. Which, of course, they haven't recognized yet, as I mentioned. So, yes, of course, it will look very bad for Turkey. Turkey hasn't been making a lot of friends in the West recently, certainly not in Greece or Cyprus. but it's one thing. It's one thing to express, your condemnation of Turkey, but that's not going to stop their tanks.
So we have a couple of minutes, Raffi, and I know you've been posting a lot about the situation, and I want to have our listeners and our viewers as well to learn more about what's happening. So where can they what website should they go to keep up with the news? Because really in the United States, we're getting really nothing.
Sure. So your followers could follow me on Twitter at Raffi Elliott, 2 F's, 2 L's, 2 T's. I also recommend Armenianweekly.com, which is where I publish a lot of my coverage of the ongoing conflict. Other great sources would be civilnet.am and evnreport.com, which has been providing excellent English language reporting on the confrontation. In fact, they have a journalist in Karabakh right now who is reporting from the front directly.
Raffi Elliott, thank you again for coming on Arab Talk.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
That was Raffi Elliott speaking to us from his perch in Armenia, in the capital city, Jamal, and very compelling analysis and depictions. What even was surprising to me is the extent of the proxy elements and the outside influences. Is this yet another big proxy war that is shaping up in another region of the world? It sounds very...
It could be, Jess, and I just want to remind you and remind our listeners that, to bear in mind that the other nations adjacent to the fighting are ever unstable. So you have Georgia on one side, and of course we have Iran, which the United States keep,
playing with,
and then the oil-rich Azerbaijan, with 7 billion barrels of proven reserves and large amounts of natural gas. And we know where there is oil, there is trouble. We've seen that. So 7 billion barrels.
We would say where there's oil, there's trouble. But when there's oil, there's proxy influences on the region attempting to manage and control. So it appears that Azerbaijan, Armenia are stuck in a lot of different influences, again, from the outside that could really inflame the situation, Jamal.
Yeah, and then they also have their pipelines, which remain vulnerable. They run as close as 10 miles from the Armenian border.
Wow.
So if this is, if Armenia decides to attack the pipelines, they're within reach. Then, of course, you have the Russia, and then you have Turkey.
Right.
Turkey now, according to Armenian reports, has been involved by, basically they're saying that they downed one of their jets, and it has been bringing some of those ISIS troops or Syrian dissidents that left Syria into Turkey. It has been dumping them on, pouring them into that conflict. And guess what? Israel,
of course,
supplies Azerbaijan with its killer drones and other weapons. So,
of course.
Again, we're going to keep an eye on this. It's not receiving enough coverage right here in the United States, but this is, I think, an important regional conflict that can easily, basically, engulf the entire area into war.
I think that's right, Jamal. It's a good segue to our next discussion about the presidential. It wasn't really a debate, but I'm going to call it the presidential nekbeh, or the presidential catastrophe that happened earlier this week on Tuesday. But the connection to the debate is you have an administration and a president who are so kind of unstable and not able to take on the big events and tasks and difficulties in the world with any kind of intelligence, that what's happening in Azerbaijan and Armenia could easily inflame into something that could cause much more problems.
Did we hear anything about foreign policy or any of that?
Well, we didn't hear anything, and that's kind of my point, that we're kind of in this really unstable time right now, where if something more happens, this is a very difficult, dangerous, and chaotic time for so much, and I'm not even going to say lack of leadership, because I think what Donald Trump is doing is not lack of leadership. I'm going to call it dangerous, catastrophic leadership, just to put it out there.
So now the commission that oversees the general election, the general election presidential debates,
right,
said yesterday that it will be making changes to the format of the remaining 2 debates. One key change it plans to implement, and this is, I think, unprecedented, is cutting off the microphones of President Trump and Joe Biden if they break the rules. I mean, that's what at least being discussed. And of course, the next debate, which is going to be a town hall setting, there will be about 15 to 20 people asking questions. And I just can't see that debate, frankly, is going to be any better. And I don't actually see if there should be another debate after what we have witnessed. It was a total disaster.
Well, I think that's a very good point, Jamal. And I have lots of different conflicting kind of reactions to it. I don't expect that a kill switch, even on the mic of Donald Trump, is going to have any impact whatsoever on the next debate, even though it's a town hall style of debate where there will be questions coming in from, from people sitting in the audience or from outside sending in their questions to the president and the former vice president. I do not believe that a kill switch is going to stop Donald Trump from being belligerent, from interrupting people, from being attacking, and from being chaotic. The idea that I had is put Donald Trump and Joe Biden in 2 separate rooms with a kill switch also, and let the questions come back and forth, and Donald Trump can either answer or not answer the questions, same with Joe Biden, but that they're separated so that Donald Trump cannot, basically be belligerent and physically, attack verbally Joe Biden, because in a town hall, Jamal, what's going to stop Donald Trump from yelling at the top of his lungs and interrupting still? Answer me that.
Well, I feel like this debate needs to be moderated like a MMA fight or a boxing match where you have the moderator right in the middle, kind of separating them, and with a remote kill switch to turn off the microphone. But literally,
but it won't stop him.
It won't stop him. Here it is. If you turn off the microphone of Donald Trump, what stops him from walking?
He won't.
To Biden's microphone or face to face, which he did with Hillary Clinton. Remember when he was stalking her and walking behind her? So he'll leave his microphone. So you really have to turn off both microphones, which means you will be interrupting Biden, because his whole basically strategy was to keep interrupting him. And I'm just going to give you my overview about that last debate before we think about the next one. Is really, I thought that Chris Wallace was a very bad moderator.
Yes.
He really lost. I mean, I know people were making excuses. Well, you cannot control it. I think he could have done more from the beginning, and he waited till the end to start asserting himself. He should have been very forceful, even if he needed to leave his seat and walk and stand in between them. So that's my take, and I know he's a very good journalist, but was really disappointed. And really, that debate descended like what? You've watched better high school debates. It was like very childish by especially Trump, and kind of, in a way, Biden with debate.
Yes.
Started, calling him names like clown and whatever. And Trump is a bully. So he is a bully. So that's why I said the moderator has to treat him as such. And frankly, also Biden, aside from using name calling and whatever, but he also lacked energy. His batteries could have been charged better.
Yeah.
And my last comment, which I'll say, that I think that clowns worldwide should demand an apology from Biden for calling Trump a clown during the debate. Because Trump is not funny, he is dangerous.
Jamal, I think your comments are spot on. That's very consistent with, my analysis. I will tell you, it's among the most painful, difficult, 90 minutes of television that I've ever had to, watch or bear witness to. In addition to the belligerence coming from the president and the biting of the bait, as you said, by Joe Biden, which I thought was a complete mistake. And he did have low energy. And, neither one of them are the sharpest knives in the drawer, to be quite honest. But the thing that disturbed me the most, and I think the people of the United States, we are all in denial about how mentally and psychiatrically and emotionally unstable the president of the United States is. What it showed to me as a medical health professional is that he is unstable from a psychiatric standpoint, unable to contain his raw emotions, even though this was planned. I mean, this is the Trump strategy, is to derail, interfere, bully Joe Biden.
Even his handlers were surprised.
Even the handlers.
They wanted him to disrupt, but
exactly.
They thought that he went overboard.
Well, the overboard is what I want to talk about. The overboard means that he is unstable, and we actually have an individual in the United States right now with the most powerful position in the world, with his finger on the codes of the nuclear arms that we have in this country, who is so unstable right now. And my prediction, and I've said this a number of times, he sees the writing on the wall. When narcissistic individuals who are this unstable see that they're going to lose potentially, he will unravel even more. I do not believe he's going to leave the office if he loses, and I don't believe he's going to leave peacefully.
He already stated that.
Jamal, we need to believe him. If he says that, we need to believe him. And
two things I know, we know from this debate. One, he will not condemn
white supremacy. He won't.
Period.
Well, but Jamal, it's not that he's not condemning it. He's advocating for it. He's encouraging
communicating.
Exactly.
He sounded like a mafia boss telling his people to kind of like to stand down or whatever.
Bear arms.
Be ready for the next order. I mean, I have never seen a president doing something like this ever.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'm worried about.
And then the other thing, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm more worried about the day after the elections than I am worried about what's going to happen before the elections.
Well, you should be, Jamal, because I'll tell you, insiders within our intelligence communities are very alarmed about this. The reports that I'm reading from people inside our intelligence services, they've made a lot of mistakes, obviously, but one of the things that we're hearing is that they're preparing for what could be armed insurrections, coup-like insurrections, civil war-like enactments that these white supremacists, like the Poor Boys and all these other groups that Trump has called to action, may at some point, if Trump loses the election, may take to the streets with arms. And
the Proud Boys. Poor Boys. I'd like to call them the Poor Boys.
Sorry.
They're mentally poor.
Yeah,
actually.
But they're proud. And they actually now have T-shirts with the sayings that Trump had during the debate. Stand back and stand down. They now have T-shirts. They were so excited to be promoted by the President of the United States. Jamal, after the election, until the inauguration, if Donald Trump loses, and it's not clear to me that he will lose, by the way, but should he lose, you can expect a reliving of among the most difficult, painful parts of our history. This is like Abraham Lincoln, the ugly and devastating civil war that we had during the 19th century. These are old wounds that are being resurrected yet again, fomented. Gasoline is being poured on this smoldering fire of resentment from people from as far back as our Civil War, Jamal. So I am very concerned. He is, in my opinion, very mentally unstable. And I'm sorry to say this, he may win again. And if he doesn't, it's going to be a very difficult, if not scary time, not just for us in the United States, but for the entire world. I mean, the world looks at us at the debate on Tuesday, Jamal. They're both laughing at us because it's so embarrassing. But I think the world is also very scared.
Well, you're absolutely right. Just like as I said earlier, the scary part is going to be what happens when and if he loses. You're right. I mean, he might not lose because he's saying basically, if I win, I win. If I lose, I still win.
I don't believe it because I won't believe the results.
Yeah, he's already planting the seed that he's getting cheated, that he's planting the seed and doubt about absentee ballots. Everything, so whatever you're going to call it, unless, in my opinion, that the elections get called very fast because the margin was very big. You can actually call, like the way you call,
right.
The state of California, Donald Trump is not going to win here and he's going to lose by a big margin. But then if this happens with the swing states like Michigan, like Florida and whatever, early on in the race, maybe,
Well, basically,
his supporters will get maybe convinced. And what drives me crazy are all these people. By the way, I directly, actually, the analysis after that, I did not watch CNN till later on. I went to Fox News. They were all elated, happy, euphoric. Oh, he won. He kicked his behind. He showed, that he was in charge. It's a total world out there, and this is the most watched network in the United States, especially when it comes to Trump supporters. So they all think that the president did extremely well, with the exception later on some people said, well, maybe he was too hyper or he overdone it, but they all believe that he won the debate.
Well, here's the thing. I kind of don't care what the 40% of the Trump loyalists believe. We're talking about 7 to 9% of the U.S. electorate, Jamal, who are relatively undecided still. I mean, you have probably 45 to 50% of the people on the side of Joe Biden and the Democrats. You have about 40% on the Republican side. We're really talking about that 10% plus or minus in the middle who remain undecided. So I would like to ask a question to you and our listeners. If you're a young mother or homemaker in the Midwest, and you have children, and you're struggling financially, and you're worried about climate change, or you're worried about the safety of your children, and you watched the performance. It was a performance, Jamal. Let's call it what it is, a kind of mentally unstable performance on Donald Trump. Would that make you, as an undecided voter, feel closer to Donald Trump? Or would you say, hey, I don't know if I could trust the future for my children or the future of my family to this guy who, is basically out of control and a big bully. I'm not sure he convinced a lot of Midwestern families, men and women who are struggling right now economically, that 10%. I'm not sure he convinced many people, Jamal.
Yeah, but I'll counter you with this, with another question, and that's the dangerous part. Having seen this debate, those people that you are talking about, are they going to go out and even vote?
They may not.
They're going to be so disgusted seeing this performance. And if you were going to inspire them to go out to watch, this humiliation, really humiliation for all Americans. I'm humiliated. You're humiliated because this is was broadcast to 70 million plus people.
And then more afterwards, yeah.
And more afterwards. And to say, for these people, are they going, are they going to be inspired to vote for Donald Trump? Are they going to be inspired to vote for Joe Biden?
But so this is the Trump strategy. This is the Republican strategy, Jamal. It's called voter suppression. And the Republican Party has been involved with voter suppression for 100 years, probably even longer for all that we know. But the strategy of the Republicans since Kennedy, or since Eisenhower, actually, the Southern strategy is to engage in systemic voter suppression of African Americans, people of color, and disenfranchised people. The only way they can win the Electoral College is by voter suppression. So Trump's strategy is to create an atmosphere where people will either give up, not feel like it's worthwhile to vote, or feel afraid to vote, because he's telling his supporters, go to the polls and watch. And they're going to go to the polls. They're going to be armed in states that have open carry laws where you can carry your weapons, and people are going to be afraid. So the strategy of suppressing the vote is the primary strategy of Trump and the Republicans right now, and it very well, hate to say this, but it very well could work, because if those 10% who are undecided, if a certain percentage of them are too afraid to vote, he could easily win re-election.
Well, Biden tried to kind of keep going back and saying to people, go vote, but I don't think he was
he's not compelling,
convincing enough.
No, he's not.
I think if you're right, which I think you are, is the Democratic Party has to do a better job in getting out the vote. They have to convince the average Joe or the average person who is not, who is undecided, that their life depends on it. This is really the message, that their life actually depends on voting, and get them out and get for example, the African American community and other people of color who went out and voted for Obama to kind of even exceed those numbers.
Right.
And not stay at home because they are disgusted and they are disfranchised, and they watched this debate and said, I throw that white towel, I'm not going to get involved. And that's really what the Democratic Party and Joe Biden has to do to win.
So I have two questions for you, Jamal, because I know we only have a few more minutes left. Two questions. What do you make of the fact that probably the most unstable, crazy, dangerous man on the planet, that Israel's best supporter and best friend is this man? So let's just break it down a little bit in terms of, like, the Israelis have this apartheid, oppressive state where they're occupying, stealing, and oppressing, millions of Palestinians, and continue to get away with it. And their biggest supporter is someone who's a thug and mentally unstable. What do we make of that? Question number one. Question number two, isn't it interesting? You have 53 Republican senators who were so humiliated for the most part last night. Not a single one had the courage, I wanted to say another word, but had the courage to confront Donald Trump publicly, condemning his actions. It's a pretty sad state on both accounts.
Yeah, well, listen, the first question, of course, we know what Donald Trump is capable of doing if he wins a second term, because then he got nothing to lose. So if you take anything that he has done on the Palestinian-Israeli front, or anything, Iran, or trying to ban the Muslims, multiply that by 10 if he gets another term. He's just going to basically accelerate everything, and now he's going to have control over the Supreme Court. So it's just like he's going to be like a runaway train, unstoppable, and that's the dangerous part. Now, as far as the GOP, I watched yesterday on CNN Ted Cruz getting into kind of in a tangle with Cuomo. I mean, this guy, Donald Trump, called him every name in the book.
And his wife.
Him personally.
And his wife.
And he attacked his wife. And then now he's like his biggest defender. And this is actually the State of the Union. These senators, congressmen, congresswomen, the GOP, they're scared. They are afraid from Donald Trump control over their base, that they will lose, that they are willing to say and do anything, and maybe later on, if he gets defeated, they'll come out and say, yeah. Look at them, every single one. Marco Rubio, same thing. He used to call him little Marco, humiliate him. Now they're all have become his surrogates.
Right.
And name every single one of them. They've criticized him heavily. They weren't expecting him to win. He won, and they just don't care.
Well,
I feel that they don't care about the rest of the country. All that they care about is getting re-elected and receiving donation and money, and they think that Donald Trump has the key to this.
Well, I think that's exactly right, Jamal. I guess my point being, I mean, I asked you a couple of, obvious questions that we've kind of talked about, but I think what raises the stakes for me is that the GOP now knows that they are part and parcel of fomenting another kind of civil war in the 21st century in the United States of America. That unless they get their arms around this and they're willing to throw the entirety of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, everything that this country has been through in our great experiment of being a democracy, they're willing to throw it all out the window in order to keep some judges on the Supreme Court. The long-term consequences of what's going to happen after the election in November if Donald Trump loses has the potential to be as catastrophic in many different ways as what happened to this country during the Civil War. So for me, at least, the stakes have gotten much higher for the GOP and their complicity of silence right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We don't have much time left, Jess, but on a lighter moment, when President Donald Trump, and when he was confronted about, releasing his taxes, the long anticipated tax returns, Biden questioned him when, and then he paused and he said, "Inshallah," right? So that kind of created some a small storm on Twitter land,
right?
And that he's using an Arabic word, basically, inshallah, which basically means literally means that if God wills it,
right?
And people make a joke because in the Arab word when you say inshallah,
it means it's not going to happen.
Saying, it's not going to happen, like manana, saying like it's never going to happen. So that was a lighter moment. If people paid attention to it, that's what happened. So you've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Please follow us on our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download all our previous episodes, and we will talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.